Hello everyone, I'm Steve Beverly. The word legend is tossed around somewhat like a beanbag today. Everybody's a legend in some quarters, and usually they really aren't. But in this case, you are talking about a living legend that transcended the word athletics, transcended the word humanity, because he was such a great friend to the people in whom he came in contact. David Blackstock was one who in Jackson, Tennessee, you mentioned that name, and unless you weren't from here, you probably knew who he was, even if you'd never met him. But if you did meet him, you knew that your life was better. Yes, the legend has left us, but he's left us with a lifetime of memories. He was born on the 4th of July, 1942. From the time David Blackstock was old enough, he put on a baseball cap and was swatting flies, the kind you smash with a bat. Jackson was his home. So was Union University, where he played baseball on scholarship. Little did he know he would become the definition of Bulldog athletics. After he returned from earning a doctorate at Southern Mississippi, he took the reins of the athletic program at Union. He co-coached baseball with his good friend Lynn Stranick. On the baseball field,
right?
Give us a reflection of what David Blackstock was like.
I met David in the summer of 1980, and we started planning at that point in time for what the next several years would be like in Union baseball. And I will say in my professional career, as long as it's been, almost 50 years in higher ed now, Steve, I had some of the best times and most fun times of my life with David in baseball, but not only baseball, but in the department as well. He was a lot of fun on the baseball field. He kept things loose where I kept things a little tighter and focused on baseball strategy and everything. So we just had a great time together on the baseball field.
You went to what at that time was called the Little World Series. What was that experience like?
Well, that was actually the NAIA World Series. It had come out of the D2 Little World Series in small colleges. That was an unbelievable situation because of the time it took us to get there. We began in 1981 together and had got back to the first round of the playoffs, NAIA national playoffs, for the first time. Really, he and I both thought our 1982 team might have been one of our best teams, and we fell a couple games short there. But then we turned around in 1983 and made the World Series and finished in third place with an unbelievable experience. And he and I just rode what the players gave us that year. We had a great bunch of kids.
Wherever you saw Coach Blackstock, he always had a big grin. And Stranick said that struck the perfect balance between their two styles as coaches.
He knew how to take a situation that you needed to be real serious about and not lose that, and yet make it light, so that everybody was not tense and they could move right on with the task at hand. And we saw that on the baseball field many times.
That perfect balance led them to take Union to the NAIA World Series, but their styles complemented each other in the office as well.
I spent the decade of the 70s at Montreat College before I came here, and I was athletic director there. And so there would be days David would come in my office and shut the door, and I'd say, uh-oh. And he'd say, okay, Mr. AD, put on your athletic director's hat. I say, okay, what have you got, Coach? And he would outline a situation for me and say, here, this is what's going on, and what do you think we ought to do? What do you think I ought to do? And give me your take on this from an athletic director's standpoint. So we would, and we'd have a great conversation. And he knew real well that a few days later, might be a week or two later, that I'd be in his office, closing the door and saying, "Okay, Mr. Chair," because he spent time as chair of the department too. And I'd say, "I've got this, this faculty situation or this curriculum situation. What do you think?"
Later in the 80s, David Blackstock turned his attention to a different sport, women's basketball, one that he had never coached, but he proved equally as adept as a winner as he did in baseball. Gary Neese called his 300th, 400th, and 500th victories on radio.
Well, I got to know David through softball. He loved the game of softball, and I played softball, and that's how I got to know him. Of course, he called me one day and said, "Would you be willing to do the basketball games?" This has been 29 years ago now. And I told him, I said, "David, that'd be the greatest thing in the world. I'd love to come work with you and with Union. I can't imagine anything any better." I can remember one of my first interviews with him. I'm not one who remembers details very well like you do. I remember generalities usually, but I do remember in particular I was interviewing him early on when I started doing the radio, and I asked him, you know, these coaches, they get, in those days they were getting film, nowadays they get video on opponents they're going to be playing. And I asked him, I said, "Coach," I said, "have you studied the film? What do you see on the film for the team that we were fixing to play?" And he looked at me and he said, "I never look at film." He said, "We're going to play our game, and if they can beat us at our game, then let them beat us."
And he meant it too.
He meant it.
Breed with the lead at 67-65. They'll get Meg Griffin back in.
The building may be called Fred DeLay Gym, but many say it's the house that Blackstock built. This was the kind of action that people loved to see in the 90s.
They finally get it to her, and Union takes the lead on her second three of the night.
Perhaps no more of David Blackstock's 508 wins as a women's college basketball coach was more exciting and brought more heart attacks than this one in the 1997 Trans-South Conference Championship game against Freed Hardeman. It's the kind of emotion that you saw in this building back when David Blackstock was coach. Conference championships meant a lot.
David, this may have been the most gut-wrenching game that I've seen on this floor since I've been a broadcaster here.
Freed Hardeman did a great job. We're awfully glad to win, and you know, we felt like we needed to win this one. Our seniors are the greatest 5 young ladies in the world. We'd have given anything if Kelly could have been dressed out, but you know, Lisa and I can't say enough about these folks.
Well, they all stepped to it. They had to get that.
This Lady Bulldog team would lead the National NAIA Championship game at Oman Arena for 38 minutes and 37 seconds before losing to their vaunted rival, Southern Nazarene. Another opportunity in 1998.
How is this year going to compare with what people have seen over recent seasons, but most recently last year?
Well, last year we were runner-up, and this year we're going to win it.
There you go. I like that. We're right there on the
How was that?
It was a week that few people would ever forget. David Blackstock brought his Lady Bulldogs in 1998 into Oman Arena with only 9 healthy players. Much of the out-of-town media, they scoffed. But this group of Lady Bulldogs, led by their coach, did something that had never been done by a Union team before.
She must get this one with 2 seconds on the clock. She has it with 1. And that's it. The Cinderella fit the glass slipper. They do. The Lady Bulldogs are the national champions.
Union has a real good team at the tournament. After the first game, they were saying Union has a pretty good team to be in the tournament. But to be seeded #1 with all the other folks that are here,
right. He was right.
You know, here's a man who, in 18 years of coaching basketball, women's basketball, had averaged 28, 29 wins a year, average losing less than 5 games a year. So he was a coach. He knew how to recruit, he knew how to coach. He was a great halftime coach. He knew what to come back in at the second half and how to play what a coach had thrown at him in the first half. But he never really got that that he needed in a national championship in front of his home fans. And I remember the night that happened. Of course, the place went wild, and he just ran over and grabbed Armida.
Everyone in the arena was on the edge of their seat. Every bounce seemed to be significant, every pass. Of course, right after we had missed the free throws, they have a chance to tie or go ahead, and they have the big turnover which ends the game. I guess when we saw the ball fly out of bounds and realized it was our ball and the game was finally over and we had won, you know, there's a moment or a sigh of relief. It was unthinkable that we would win the national championship last year. You know, not in any way, as we have talked before, not in any way because of heart and skill and character to put that team down. I'm certainly not doing that, but I would say that, you know, individually we've been much more talented. And I think in our classes and to our team, so many times we talk about character and teamwork and playing a role and being willing to give up some things for the benefit of the team. I honestly think a lot of that had to do with the lack of numbers. I think that was very significant. You know, every day we practiced with only 8 or 9, and they knew they had, you know, they were going to get playing time, a lot of it. The teamwork, the chemistry is just not the same when you've got a few who are playing all the time and a few who don't get much playing time.
Coach of the Year award goes to Dr. David.
This night, people would take away far more than Union's 73, Southern Nazarene 70. This first Lady Bulldog National Championship would be won for the man who has taken Union to victory lane 478 times in 16 years. But until this night, he would never experience the pinnacle. In the last 5 years, David Blackstock hasn't even been voted Coach of the Year in his own conference, despite his overwhelming success. He never complains, never shows disappointment, just keeps right on winning. Blackstock will step down after one more season, one which he'll share head coaching duties with his old sidekick, Lisa Hutchins. But the legacy is now complete, and March 24th, 1998 will be etched forever as a milestone day for David Blackstock and Union University.
Limcool getting the offensive board and follows.
1999, another pinnacle milestone for David Blackstock. Victory number 500 at Fred DeLay Gymnasium.
It is number 500. David Blackstock, 89-57. Union wins it.
Girls,
You know I love you. Armida, you know I love you. Fans, thank you. I feel like I'm at a eulogy. I don't know.
One of the happiest days of David Blackstock's coaching life. And then, 1 week later, everything changed. Lisa Hutchins, David Blackstock's longtime assistant, found dead in her home, a suicide victim.
Lisa was 37. You never expect someone at that age to go away, and the suddenness of it, to be in practice one day and see her doing what she loved so much, and then the next day for her to be gone. You know, it's the kind of thing that will just take time.
What was that like emotionally for David?
Well, David and Tommy were the ones. Tommy Sadler were the ones that went over and waited for the police to break in there, and it was emotional for everybody. It was emotional for the fans. We had a bus load heading to Batesville, Arkansas, and had to go ahead and leave. Lisa hadn't arrived yet, and had to go ahead and leave in order to be able to get there in time. While they went to try to find out why she hadn't shown up for the bus ride, I got the call, and we had to turn the bus around. Of course, it was full of fans, and it was a very emotional time for not only the fans but for David. I'm not sure he ever got over that. That was his last year to coach, and he was turning the reins over to Lisa, and I'm just not sure he ever really got over that.
The entire Union campus, as well as the Lady Bulldogs, needed time to mourn. Eventually, David Blackstock had to find a successor. He found him in a 29-year-old man who was already on staff. He was the Union men's assistant coach, Mark Campbell. What did you think when he came to you and said, "We'd like for you to be the head coach of the Lady Bulldogs"?
Well, you know, I've had the fortune of being able to play somewhere where I got to see him coach, and I remember just talking to him about those things that the things I thought were true, playing against him, and then how the opposite was true. So I thought he was someone that was rough and hard, and because you just see that from the outside, and then once being able to be here at Union and be able to see him on a daily basis and the enjoyment everybody had being around him. You know, I just thought it was it's hard to fill somebody's shoes that's had that much success and is that looked up to in our community. So very appreciative for him and thankful to the Lord that there's just opportunity to be in a place like this.
Mark Campbell found encouragement from David Blackstock, and he also had a mentor.
When you talk about mentors, there's two ways to look at it. One would be that they would take you aside and have these deep conversations, or you just watch somebody's life and you watch how they interact with people on a daily basis. And he did both. But the most impactful to me is just to watch the idea that Union was his home.
Championship.
Mark Campbell says David Blackstock's life was an example to everyone, including himself.
When we do anything, the reason why we do it is the thing that's going to stick out. And so to choose to be in a place like Union, to do it in a Christian atmosphere, and to do it relationally and with purpose, that's something that I've loved about this place, and I loved about our athletic department. It's something that Coach Blackstock was our athletic department for a long period of time.
It was one of Tennessee's storied sports careers. David Blackstock is enshrined in the Jackson-Madison County, Union University, and Tennessee Sports Halls of Fame. He coached 3 different sports at the college level, but in 2008, he decided it was time to call it a day. He passed the reins as athletic director to a man he knew and loved as a player, and his longtime assistant athletic director and best friend. Tommy Sadler had lunch just about every day of his professional career with David Blackstock. And Tommy, in all of those years, what did those lunches mean? Sometimes I know you talk shop, but other times it was just to have fun.
Well, you know, Steve, I was thinking last night, there are a lot of people that he may have confided in about how he felt about me, but I know how he felt about everybody else in those lunches. So we had a great time. A person is very fortunate in their life if you can have a friend that knows your greatest sorrows, your greatest heartaches, your greatest failures, and still loves you unconditionally. And that was what I was fortunate to have with David Blackstock.
Someone once said, wherever you see David Blackstock, you're going to see people. And indeed you did. He was a great family man, loved his wife Armida and his children Rebel and Dixie. Whereas sports was a huge part of his life, it was not all of his life. And it was that infectious personality that kept people coming back and migrating to him again and again.
He's a great people person to begin with. He loved people. He loved being around people. As some have alluded to before, he was a great jokester. You know, don't get in a one-line contest with him because you will finish a distant second. And people loved being around him because he was warm. He loved God, and he felt like part of that great commandment was to love others. And he did that. He showed it in his life. You know, everywhere, the places that I travel now where we run into people that we used to be in the conference with and different things, you know, they all still asked, how's Coach Blackstock? Because he had such a warm part about him that made everybody feel comfortable around him. You know, as one of his former players, I can tell you he also had every player who ever played for him, there were moments where he was not so warm. But, you know, even in those moments, you always, when he walked away from you, you felt sad because you let him down.
Watch David Blackstock.
This is the David Blackstock that most people saw. Tough as nails, but with a heart of gold. A competitor through and through. In fact, the word competitor is how Tommy Sadler describes him most. But it wasn't just on the court where he could beat the stuffings out of you.
He would not play you in ping pong. He wouldn't play you in spades. We played many a card game on road trips. The guy wanted to win. He was a great competitor. He didn't play anything. He was a Christian gentleman at the end of the game, but during the game, he wanted to win. Great competitor. And we were very fortunate in those years when the NAIA National Tournament was here because for a week or 10 days there, his picture was on the newspaper, and being a local Jacksonian, who a lot of people already knew him, but everybody knew him. We would go to lunch. Every day we went to lunch, somebody stopped by to say, asked about his team or something. So because of that period of time, which was a great tournament, a great part of Jackson history, he was on the front page every day.
So what do you say about a legend that hasn't already been said multiple times over? How do you say goodbye when your memories of that legend will always be with you? How do you tell the next generation of students and people in this community how and why David Blackstock was a legend who meant so much to so many? Just listen to some of his best friends.
I don't doubt that his biggest legacy will be that he was a compassionate friend.
We had an interchange with experiences as AD and chairs to where we had a base for sharing.
I'm just thankful to be in a place where my faith and family, and then to be able to coach a fun sport, I can all look back and say it's kind of traced to God using him in all of our lives.
And people in the community are going to remember the kind of competitor he has. But they're also going to remember that in a loss, he was very gracious and very humble, and he loved his players. He loved this university. He loved the people here, and he loved his players.
What a great listener. What great advice he could give you. He was just a great friend.
Great person, great godly man. Loved the Lord and loved others. He loved the Lord with all his heart, and he loved others the same way.
And so a legend has left us, but he's left us with so many memories and stories that we'll carry for a lifetime. I want to close with one personal story. 25 and a half years ago, David Blackstock called me at home on a Tuesday morning, and in that crackly southern accent of his, asked this question: "Can you help us tonight?" Sounded a little like Mr. Haney on Green Acres. And I said, "I don't know, David, perhaps I can." "Well, we need somebody to call our basketball game tonight." I said, "David, I haven't called a basketball game in 17 years. "Well, you've called them before, haven't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I have, but again, remember, it's been 17 years. He said, "Then you're well qualified." So here I went at Fred DeLay Gym that night, thinking this was possibly being a one-night stand. And I called Union versus Lambeth, and I thought maybe it's just going to be a few games. 25 years later, I wrapped up a career that I owe to David Blackstock because he gave me a chance and believed in me, the same as he believed in so many young athletes that he took under his wing for so many years, the same as he believed in his former player, Tommy Sadler, who he traveled many miles with as athletic director and passed it off to Tommy whenever he decided to retire. The kind of encouragement that he gave someone like Mark Campbell when he gave him a chance to become his successor as the coach of the Union Lady Bulldogs. But despite all of the thrills that all of us have had, and for me, I was there behind the microphone for his 400th and 500th coaching wins. I was there when he won his national championship in 1998. But all of that pales to the fact that I'm proud he was my friend. And that's the way everyone who came into contact with him felt. Our lives were much better because David Blackstock was a part of them. And I can tell you, we already miss him. I'm Steve Beverly. Thanks for joining us.